Hey guys, Tarke here. I'm someone who's known for being quite negative when it comes to design decisions, and from that, you might be surprised here, this is actually going to be a very positive video. This is going to be a fairly long discussion video where I talk about why I feel like the current state of the game means that Path of Exile's in the best place it's ever been for hardcore bow players and projectile players in general. Now, because this will be a very long talky video, I have included a very small gameplay section for people with ADD. Please enjoy the amazing gameplay quality. So, what makes me think that the current state of the game makes hardcore bow builds viable or better than they normally are? So, for context, I'm someone who's mostly known for only playing bow builds. I'm currently level 97 on a bow-based slayer in hardcore, doing the grind to 100. Now, I'm someone who's never really been interested in the 100 grind before, and I've always been kind of frustrated at my favorite kinds of builds, generally evasion-based, right side of tree, life bows, for quite a long time haven't been the most suitable hardcore viable option. So what exactly has changed? These are the things I'm kind of going to go through. Pierce rework, buffed life, mom, balance changes in general. Let's sort of start off with the first thing, so Pierce. Why does the Pierce rework make things more accessible? So, for example, using my current character, I am a tornado shot character, and the way I'm achieving my Pierce is through Lionized Vision. My entire Pierce comes from a singular chess piece. Before this patch, before 3.0, Pierce was mostly percentage-based, so you needed multiple sources of Pierce. Now, what they did is they changed this, giving all previously existing like chance-based source of Pierce guaranteed Pierce with some kind of limit. So if we bring up the wiki real quick. So just to quickly rattle through them. Voidwalker Boots. While you have phasing, 5 Pierce. Penetrating Quivers. 1 Pierce just inbuilt. There's an Essence which can give you another 2 to 3. So for builds like Cause to carry the non-attack based builds which still incorporate Pierce and bows, they can get a single quiver, throw an Essence on it, and they're looking at like 3-4 Pierce, all problems solved. Poacher's Aim, a unique jewel, 1 Pierce. I used this one source as Pierce for my current tornado shot character up until level 92 and was completely fine. Projectile Weakness, a very underrated curse that gives substantial damage for basically everything, and better than most elemental curses for a lot of people. Check it out. Gives a guaranteed 100% Pierce for all affected enemies. Pierce Support Gem gives up to 4 additional targets at base level 20. The Eyeshot Support Gem gives 5 Pierce per one. Fork has always been fairly accessible through Rigwald's Quills, but the player base is now starting to go, oh, this is pretty good. So from these base examples, you've suddenly gotten a case where Pierce is less restrictive. Why does this matter? So previously, the way that you would achieve your Pierce would be by sacrificing a gem slot and spending skill points on this skill tree. Currently, you can get Pierce just from taking either piercing shots or this Pierce giving 2 and 3. Previously, you had to spend 4 points in this cluster to get 50% Pierce. This is a base outline of my Burning Arrow 100% fire conversion Ignite build from last league. Now, you can see I had to spend 4 points here and sacrifice a gem slot just to achieve 100% Pierce. Now, I have less points needed. I don't even need to use a gem slot. I can use one of those other things. Why is this important? This means there are resources I can now spend on other things. I can free up a gem slot going for a better DPS option. I can free up skill points to chase down more jewels, which equals more life, or just more raw life nodes. Okay, so that's cool. You've got an extra few skill points. Now what else is important? If we look at this skill tree, now this was a 100% fire conversion, elemental overload, non-crit build. I played this very successfully up until I believe 92 before it ripped, getting 1 shot, and I was at about 6-7k HP wearing a combs. Now, with the gear that I have on my current character, level 97, you can see I have 5.7k life and Mind Over Matter, giving me an additional 1.8k mana on top, giving me a very strong, effective 7k plus HP pool without having to use Comb's Chest. If we take a very similar layout for the build I played last league, you can see that even with a level 97 tree, 220% life in the tree. With my current gear setup, I'm barely even getting 6k life, meaning I would be forced into using combs before to get a safe buffer for hardcore. Right. So because of the changes to the buffed life values on gear, you can now get hybrid life rolls, and the fact that we have more skill points to play with, and the fact that we have options such as Mind Over Matter, for the non-crit, purely right side of tree builds, you have way more options. Way more options, meaning the life values are much juicier. Also, and this is very important, we also have more reflect options. Having more reflect options means we're safer against reflect, which is pretty big. It means Vol Pact is less necessary. It means that you're not pushed into routing certain ways. You don't have to use items such as Sybils, and Sybils got buffed, giving it better reflect protection. So, we have reduced reflect from Primeval Force, giving 10%. You can get an additional 10% from Ash, Frost, and Storm. Basically, every single character, thanks to Pantheon, gets 25% reduced reflect there. So from a baseline point of view, if you're playing a elemental build, which, let's be honest, is most builds, especially when it comes to bow builds, no one really does pure fizz bows these days, you have just an inbuilt 35% mitigation. If you are going for a pure fizz setup, you can go Slayer and get 50% reduced, plus Yugle for 75. You have the option of Scion, giving you even more. Before, if you wanted to be very safe against Reflect, you had to either gimp your gearing or be forced into playing Elementalist, which then put you in a very awkward part of the skill tree. This was a big issue for a lot of builds before doing kind of janky conversion stuff, and the only way to really make it work was to be a CI Volpax bow build, which was kind of awkward because those builds used to be very expensive to get good ES values. Amazing DPS lets one-shot Shaper builds for softcore, but for hardcore they were always fairly restrictive. Okay, so we've got more reflect options. Also, by having more reflect options and from the Pierce rework, Scion is amazing for bow builds these days. So Deadeye gives Pierce 2, which solves Pierce problems where you don't need to waste either armor slots, skill points, or a gem slot for Pierce. It gives you additional projectile, which we all know how powerful that is for skills such as Barrage and Tornado Shot. And you have the option of 50% reduced Ellie Reflect, or Physical Reflect, or Crit if you're a crit build. The changes to Scion, with conjunction with the Reflect improvements and the Pierce improvements, is huge and completely opens up skill tree options. Scion is another source of stacking skill points, meaning another source of easy routing on the tree and getting life. There's always been the constant meme that if you're playing a crit build, you have to go for the Scion life section. You can now do a crit right side of tree Valve Pact Rat's Nest build and still be having like 5-6k life very easily without a combs, because if you want to play that kind of build, you just go Scion. You get Assassin, getting a really nice amount of crit, and then you pick between either Reflect options or Raider for Onslaught and Frenzy charges. Now, before you all start shouting at me, but Tarke, these were fine, we had CI Valve Pact before. The CI Valve Pact nerfs, I know I'm upsetting people here, is also one of the greatest things to happen to hardcore bow builds. Okay, so let's pretend that you're playing this current build. I want a Tornado Shot Devotos. Now, you could get Devotos with enchants last league. That was kind of like the only non-hubris circlet base that you could get enchants on. But let's say you wanted more life. Because of the changes, I can get helms like this. I can get a really juicy rare with a shit ton of life on it, a bunch of resists, easily. You can actually get non-hubris circlet bases. You don't realize how powerful it is. You go, but you could just use a hubris circlet before. It doesn't matter. No. Let's say you're doing a Queen of the Forest build. A lot of bow builds go Queen of the Forest, and Queen of the Forest is more accessible now because we're less dependent on combs. We now have better access to the correct bases. Star Conjures are very often enchanted by lab farmers. Just raw lion pelts, etc. You can get access to these really powerful items which previously were completely dominated by the CI meta. Obviously, a lot of builds have fallen because of that, but talking purely about bow builds from a hardcore perspective, this is very good for us. Right. Also, Dying Sun is an item which has been mandatory or near for basically every single projectile build since it's existed. This has always been a very high-ticket chase item, and in the current state of the game, in the current league of Harby, is the most affordable it's ever been. We've had AoE nerfs, which have made this Dying Sun much less attractive for the vast majority of AoE-based builds. You're only really seeing it on projectile builds these days. Thanks to the easy accessibility of Tier 16 maps, thanks to Beachhead and the upgrading you can do via the orbs, we have more players doing Guardians. We have more access to Guardian maps, more access to Shaper fragments, more access to Shaper items equals cheaper Dying Sun. So you have cheaper accessibility to one of the most powerful flasks for your build, easier accessibility to Helm enchants on bases which are actually good for your build, and all around good. Now to talk about Pantheon. So I've already touched briefly on Pantheon, and Pantheon was a system that I and many others completely shat on when it first came out. But I have to admit, Pantheon's also been pretty big for bow builds. So aside from the fairly obvious Soul of Yugal giving the reduced reflect damage taken, you have a few very interesting things for the Slayer or the non-Vol packed bow builds, of which there are a fair few. Soul of Arakali, when upgraded, gives 50% increased recovery of life and any shield if you've stopped taking damage over time recently. All non-Vol packed bow builds run Blood Rage. Whenever a level 1 cast on damage taken you run Blood Rage, whenever a level cast on damage taken, a Mortal Coil gets triggered, you stop taking physical damage. Blood Rage is physical damage. It stops your Blood Rage, stops your degen, gives you 50% increased recovery of life. This affects Leech. This is a huge buff, to example, for Slayer Leech. You can further exaggerate that using items such as Null and Void, which gives you immunity for physical damage for 1.5 seconds on Rampage. It's huge. It's really good. Now, ignoring just the options that bow builds have, Pantheon makes running Lab a lot easier. Because you have access to more raw physical mitigation, most bow builds are acro. Getting Ublab was nearly always a case of getting a boost, or you do it yourself and you just one-shot Azari before he one-shots you. Now, Uber Azari has never been a particularly scary encounter. It's fairly easy to do, but it's a encounter that most people respect because if you mess up, taking a massive physical hit one-shots most bow builds. Well, now we have access to loads of Physmit, meaning that it's easier for bow builds, mostly evasion-based, to do the thing which unlocks the most powerful part of the characters. We know how strong Ascendancy is. Pantheon makes getting your Uber much less of a gruel or a challenge or whatever for the people who don't want to go to use boosts. All talking from a hardcore perspective, this is pretty big. Also, for people getting boosts, more people are doing Azaro now, and more builds have access to farming Ublab because they've got all this mitigation. We have 25% reduced physical damage over time taken. You slap this on when you're getting your Uber boost, your previously very squishy evasion build with no armor suddenly has a bunch of mit against a lot of the traps. I don't like Pantheon as a system, and I know I hated Pantheon, but Pantheon's done a lot of really good things for bow builds. Okay, moving on. Density nerfs. Someone's getting really triggered by this video. Okay, so this is my current atlas. It's nothing that fancy, and I'll quickly go through the tiers that I have shaped. So, on 10, I've got shaped dunes. On 11, I have racecourse. On 12, I have vault and shaped ashenwood. On 13, this is a bit of a weird one, I have shaped shore. I have scriptorium. In hardcore, shabs are worth something. The boss just drops a lot of shab cards. I do it for some reason. I also have gorge. 14, I have nothing. 15, I have abyss. Because of the absolute gutting of strands just being snapped like my brittle bones, now people are doing more different map types. Because people are doing more different map types, and because, you know, while there are some very obvious strong options, sure, Philly Sexton is still very strong. You know, people pick between Ashen or Racecourse, so some people doing Vault, some people doing Spider, etc. Before, everyone was basically either just doing Strand, or they were doing, like, massive Sextant blocked 15s, 13s, or Spider. But because there's, like, more general options and more diversity, there are more open map layouts, less, like, purely you only do Strand. This also makes bow builds more attractive because bow builds are really good at mass AoE coverage. AoE's got a nerfed Path of Projectiles. Projectiles are one of the best AoE coverages. It's just a really good time to be a bow build. Okay. What else from the massive gutting and changes has made bow builds better? Double dipping being removed has made bow builds better. So again, looking back at an example of my build from last league, you can see that last league, projectile nodes were just the go-to if you had any kind of double dipping. Most builds were either some kind of poison or chaos base, ignite based, or they just went 100% elemental conversion, lightning, whatever, mix of lightning and fire, pew pew pew, one-shot shaper, would crit. They had some ignite a lot of the time. Any ignite or dot-based build would stack projectile nodes and projectile damage, projectile jewels over everything else. Because of that, it dictated a lot of your routing. So for example, on this build, which was again, 100% fire conversion burning area build, just filling in all of these projectile nodes is more attractive than taking these wed nodes, or now Iedea nodes. Meaning that I'd rather just stick to this section of the tree than coming through here, getting access to stuff like Devotion. It makes jewels much more accessible because it's no longer as important to just stack generic projectile damage, increased damage, fire damage, chaos damage. Because of the way that double dipping worked, because these basically gave you double the damage, it made getting stuff like resists on your jewels much less attractive. Because getting stuff like resists on your jewels is much more attractive, going for life rolls on your jewels is much more attractive because the dampening of double dipping, it makes our gearing a lot easier. Getting more resists on our jewels means stacking certain unique items more powerful, makes it more accessible. My current character is dependent on jewels, which in the old meta would seem terrible. We have life, double resists. We have fire damage. Okay, this would have been a pretty good jewel last league. Life resists. We then have physical damage, life, chance to ignite, resist. My build needs chance to ignite, that's why I have chance to ignite most of my jewels. And here we have life, chance to ignite to resists. In the old meta, these would have been terrible. Now, yes, my current build requires immolate, so chance to ignite is a bit of a weird one. But even in the case of like an immolate build where you need a certain amount of chance to ignite, I would have been better off just hard scaling projectile damage because of how busted it was. Also, because Ignite has been gutted, and I really, really, really miss Ignite builds, and I want Ignite to come back, it makes going EO non-crit far, far more attractive, because a big issue I had with my old builds, which did the whole like EO LE conversion stuff with Burning Arrow, they were really solid builds. Bob did them. People like Bob, they think he's a good player. He did them, so it wasn't just me doing bad bow builds, LE jiggle. You had this annoying thing where, because you weren't crit, you needed to stack a certain amount of chance to ignite. This was really awkward. They gave a bunch of damage to the chance to ignite gem. So if they ever make Ignite good again, because of the changes in 3.0, you are now not gutting yourself completely by not going crit. Now the final one. This is like the final like boom, nail in the coffin, which really makes me excited to play bow builds in the current meta. Bisco's Collar. So again, this is kind of a very niche one. This is talking more about the elemental conversion side of bow builds. Everyone who knows kind of like the signal shot. Signal fire is a very popular quiver because it gives you up to 35% of physical damage as extra fire damage. Because of this, everyone used to use this and then Zoph's Blood to get Avatar Fire. This plus Fizz to Lightning, so on and so forth. We have access to easier elemental conversion now through Winter Spirit and this, right? Giving us 40% of our Fizz converted to cold. Ice Shot got buffed, giving more conversion over to cold. Meaning it's easier to achieve 100% pure elemental damage. We have vast more options. So why is Bisco's good in this? For the builds that were going pure fire focus, which is a lot of them, running Bisco's over Zoph's Blood, everyone kind of wants to do it. Meaning, more builds are taking Avatar Fire on the tree, or they're doing mixed elemental setups. Basically, because of how broken and busted, and this needs nerfing, this amulet is, the trees are now way more interesting for 100% elemental conversion bow builds. So, just to briefly summarize. Better access to stuff. Oh, and one other thing. They also made Lionized Glare the best item in the game because they gave it Fast Shot. It was already an amazing item. They then shoved a up to 30% more multiply on it. And we also got Tempest Binding, which is also very good for Wanders because we now can get pseudo 6-link, AoE clear, and then like a 6-link bow clear, still use a Combs, or you can do weird setups where you go like 4-link, 4-link. Basically, they've buffed and made a bunch of items, making combs better to use, which draws into the strengths of using a two-handed bow, while also making combs less mandatory by buffing loads of other stuff. You get access to more life, better damage, more interesting tree options. You're not completely gutted now, and I've just made a 20-minute video completely praising GGG's balance. I'm Tarke. Have a good day. Bye-bye.